Hi again then guys, and so I've had a number of private messages and public comments regarding the new information that's dropped about the PS5 in a general sense, but also more specifically for us of course, how that is going to impact racing games. And of course when it comes to the PS5, that is predominantly Gran Turismo. Now, Gran Turismo Sport could be affected if it gets some kind of cross-console variant or cross-console play onto the PS5, but at the bare minimum, the next Gran Turismo game will almost certainly be affected by these changes. Now, the first thing is, for those who haven't seen these new details, that the PS5 is slated for a release at the end of next year, the end of 2020. So we'll have to wait and see. Of course, we'll have to also see how that impacts, as I said, GT Sport's timeline, because as we discussed before, they have long-term plans for stuff like the Porsche integration into the game with the Vision GT program, etc. But the interesting stuff regarding the PS5's new features is in particular when it comes to the controller and also some hard drive stuff as well. At least that's the stuff that I'm going to point out in particular in this video. Now the first thing is new integration of the vibration function, or the feedback, if you will, through a controller. And of course, this doesn't affect a wheel user like it would a controller user, but at the same time, many of us do still use a controller, myself included. So they're actually getting rid of the old rumble packs that they used to give the controller that vibration function. And if you've ever seen one of those clear controllers where you can see what's inside, or if you've taken one apart, you'll know, of course, that those rumble packs are actually like a spinning weight, which gives that vibration motion to the controller. So they've done away with that, and instead they have new actuators in the actual grips of the controller. So similar location to where the spinning rumble packs were before, but it's going to give a more direct feel to it and a more nuanced feel. And that, of course, is the more important thing, because when they were testing this new feature, some of those who tested it said that they could actually feel more of a transition between road and dirt racing, or rallying in other words, in a more realistic sense than just through the controller as we would usually have with a rumble strip. So that's an interesting change. It's certainly going to be valid for racing games, and of course in other games like, Call of Duty, whatever the case may be, you're probably not going to notice the vibration function all that often because you're kind of focused on other things on screen, whereas with a car game you can kind of notice it more. When you hit a rumble strip, or if you go off-road, or if you have a crash, they're much more punctuated moments in gaming in a racing game where those rumble packs would come into play and where this new system will be showcased. Now the next thing is regarding the triggers on the controller. Now, of course, the Xbox controllers had the trigger method for longer than PlayStation. R2 and L2 used to just be buttons, and that was it. But after Xbox did it, then the PS3, I think it was, did it as well, and certainly the PS4 does. And the PS4's triggers are great. I love working with them. I've actually got it set up so that the triggers on R2 and L2 are my throttle and brake, in a very similar way to how Forza does on the Xbox. You get much more nuance than with the X button. So the changes that are going to happen there are actually with adaptable triggers, with theoretically some user interface available as well, where you can set up the kind of resistance that you want those buttons to have. And again, that's a cool feature for those who, in a very Project Cars kind of sense, like to really hone in and adjust every aspect of their gameplay experience. Now, for me personally, I tend to honestly go with the default settings for a lot of these things, so I might play around with it and end up using default anyway, but for those who are into this kind of stuff, it's certainly nice to have the option. Life is all about having options after all. Now, the next one is to do with the speaker. Of course, the PS4 has that integrated speaker in the controller as well. Not necessarily a hugely important thing for Gran Turismo. I don't think I've ever noticed that really being used in the game. In something like Batman Arkham Knight, for instance, you really notice that speaker integration, but in Gran Turismo, not really, at least for me. So that's just an interesting tidbit, really. And the final one is that the controller is going to be heavier than it already is, but not by much, according to Sony. And actually, I said that that was going to be the last thing, but it's not. It's the last thing regarding the controller. The final thing that I'm going to discuss in this video, though, is regarding storage. And this is a very valid point, considering how large games are becoming, especially certain games like Gran Turismo, where it's, over 100 gig, I think? Well over, probably, at this point. And although for me, for instance, I don't have a huge amount of games on my PS4 anyway, maybe like half a dozen that I play regularly, at least, and many people find it hard to keep something like Gran Turismo Sport going, taking up so much memory that you can't really have that many other games without external storage, which incidentally I also have anyway. So with the PS5, what Sony is saying is that you will have the choice, essentially, of deleting certain parts of a game or even installing certain parts of a game that currently you wouldn't have as much control over. For example, removing the multiplayer aspect of a game, or removing the, according to them, single-player aspect of a game. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of practical differences that makes to a game as massive as Gran Turismo is now. And Gran Turismo has always been large in terms of data for the graphics side of things, but of course as you move into what the console can cope with, of course the game is going to get bigger and bigger. So with the way the PS5 does things, it'll be interesting to see how those changes affect something as massive as Gran Turismo Sport already is, or how big Gran Turismo 7 could well be as well. So that's it for my highlights that I just wanted to keep you guys in the loop about, of course, if you were not already aware of this. And even if you were already aware, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Which part of this do you think is a great new feature? Maybe some things that you don't like, and maybe some other things regarding the implications of Gran Turismo that you might have some thoughts on. But that's it overall for this particular update. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.